it's easy to sit in the stands and eat popcorn and boo LeBron James playing the game because they missed a shot. And it's a whole different game when you have to be LeBron James and make that shot. And I did this as an employee. When I was in 2017, I criticized the CEO of the company I worked for every week. A lot of people in the company did. And then future years later, I was in the exact same position being criticized by people. And I finally understood that it's a whole lot different when you have to be that person and take that shot and make it than sitting in the stands talking about how you would have taken the shot. We've had like a bunch of topics around signal-based selling and go-to-market and a bunch of stuff like that. But I was looking back at my calendar today and I didn't even know this until this morning. But today is the 5-year anniversary of when I started my first company, Refine Labs, and I actually had took the entrepreneurial journey after. I think I was asked to resign as the head of marketing for a Series A company in around February of 2019. And then I took some time. I went on a vacation, did some thinking, and I did some things back. And I thought about applying for some jobs. And I remember I was in my living room and unemployed, had a small severance, but I basically had no money. And I'm going through these LinkedIn jobs and reading the description and literally didn't even have the energy to apply to a job. And I was like, I don't want to do this again. I don't want this. And so I decided I'm going to give it 90 days. I'm going to give it a try. At that point, I didn't even incorporate. Refine Labs wasn't incorporated until it was a real tangible business later that year. But today was the day where I made the decision and started it and got my first client. Shout out MJ Smith, who was my first client. And so if everyone's good with it, I wanted to go in a little bit of a different direction today as something. I hope it's valuable to all of you, but it's really something for me where I kind of want to talk through the story and the journey of how it went and some of the key things. I remember moments, and I'll talk through them, where I was on my kitchen floor crying in tears about how happy I was for certain things. I remember the exact day. I remember exactly what it looked like, where I was. I also remember, conversely, times where I'm in the exact same situation crying because of how bad the pain feels about being an entrepreneur and some of the things that most people never experience that I've gone through. I'm proud of them. Entrepreneurship is an incredible journey of personal growth and learning about yourself and growing. And you don't have to be an entrepreneur to do that. Everybody goes through their own journey professionally and personally through growth and learning and messing up and having incredible wins and feeling those cycles of emotions. And so I'm just going to kind of talk through in almost a chronological timeline about the journey so far. Hopefully that sparks some questions that may be more mindset, entrepreneurial related. I think that we'll have time for questions, but sometimes when I do these things, I'll literally talk for the whole hour, just if I get into the flow and I'm really feeling it. So there'll be marketing concepts in here for sure, but a lot of it's going to be personal growth and things like that for today. So I hope you all are good to go on that journey. I hope that it's valuable for you. I hope that maybe you see a different side of me. You see a different angle about how I approach life and business. And this is totally random. I have no notes. I have things that are in my brain, and I'm just gonna share. So let's do it. It'll be fun. So I talked through a little bit, right? I was asked to resign. I didn't even have any energy to apply, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna give this 90 days. At the time when I did that in 2019. I had $65,000 in student loan debt. I had $3,000 in my bank account, and I had a 3-month severance at $10,000 a month pre-tax. And so not a lot of runway, not a lot of stuff going, no money and no financial security pretty much. And so I think that like a lot of people can relate to that. My financial position is very different today, but like I was like that. I know how it feels. I came from not a lot. And in order to do that, like I had already moved in with a roommate. So I like went from like $1,500 a month in an apartment to like $700 a month in South Boston. I sold my Audi Q5 that was like a $500 a month payment, cut my insurance. I started taking public transportation for like $2 on the Red Line in Boston to go to like the gym or do things instead of taking an Uber or driving my car or paying for parking. Like I cut everything out of my lifestyle for that period of time. And I think that's in a lot of cases necessary to take a couple of steps backwards financially and like even like how people perceive you, to be able to have that opportunity for people that don't have a lot of things handed to them. And for the beginning of like what it wasn't even called Refine Labs back then. For the beginning of my company, I was just acting as a consultant. I did one $100 an hour contract with Firetrace. MJ Smith was the VP of marketing there. I got a couple of other customers during that summer. I had started to comment and post on LinkedIn a little bit back in 2019. I had hired someone to do like outbound emails and sales named Miles Campbell. He still works at Refine Labs today. We had did that for like 15 days and we were like, fuck, this isn't going to work. And so then we made Miles my video editor. And we had transitioned, we basically went from like, okay, we're not doing the traditional like outbound sales play to try and get meetings to sell people. We're going to try a different approach using content. LinkedIn was working. A lot of people didn't see that opportunity in 2019 that early. And damn, like in the summer of that year, I remember for a 6-week period of time that I would wake up on a Saturday, I would go to the gym, I would come back, I had nothing written, and I would write a text post on LinkedIn about a challenge that I was having or like some win that I had. And I would post it on Saturday morning, and that post would get traction for 3 weeks. And I knew when I hit post that it would get more than 1 million views. For 6 weeks in a row, I had that happening where some of my posts would get engagement and likes and comments for a month. Now a post that does well will get likes and engagement for 4 to 8 hours. It was just an entirely different platform back then. And back at that time, what people would say, everybody that was on LinkedIn, posted on LinkedIn, what they would say is only post on LinkedIn Monday through Friday. Business people don't use LinkedIn on the weekends. And so what happened when I started posting on Saturday, what actually happened is that a lot of people still looked at LinkedIn on Saturday and nobody posted because that was like the current best practice. And so I would be one of the few people that posted. A bunch of people would still be on the platform, and I would get massive reach and engagement because of it. And that was like the first sort of process that was the realization. That's when we moved Miles into video editing. It's like, okay, this is real. Like this is something that a lot of people don't see, and I can build a company around it. On August 7th, if people want to go to my Instagram, you can see the post, August 7th, 2019. I posted it before anything really tangibly had happened in my career. I still have it on the record that at that day, I knew there's only a couple times in your career where you feel this, where you know something is going to work so well and you believe in it so much and people don't see it, that it's going to fundamentally change your life. And I realized that about LinkedIn on August 7th, 2019, and started to go all in on that. I think I hired my first employee, Ryan Finkelstein, in August or September. At that point, I had like $20K a month in recurring revenue. So if you can imagine this, $20K a month in recurring revenue. I hire Ryan after payroll and taxes. Maybe I'm paying him $10K a month. And all of a sudden, your income goes down. My income went down by 50%. A lot of people, a lot of solopreneurs are not willing to take that cut, that short-term cut, in order to bring people on to then be able to get to the next level. And that's why they get stuck. And so you'll see a lot of themes here about taking a small step back, which then propels you to take many steps forward. Around that time in 2019, I mentioned this about yesterday, which is interesting, that people started to directly plagiarize all my content. I was like one of the prolific content creators at that time. I was coming up strong. My follower growth is going crazy. I would post something about marketing on a Tuesday, and I would wake up the next day and inbox messages from somebody sharing a post with me saying, this is a direct copy of your post from yesterday. Or here's this person in Germany that translated exactly what you said yesterday into German and posted it in German. And a bunch of people started plagiarizing my text posts and my perspective. And so I thought, nobody's going to be able to copy video. We're going all in on video. And so my strategy around video on LinkedIn was not like, video's the future. It's going to work so much better. I did not have a plan like that. I was just reacting to how people were plagiarizing all my stuff and said, you're not going to be able to copy this. And so I was one of the first people on LinkedIn to go all in on video. I post video 4 or 5 times a week minimum for the past 5 years. It fundamentally changed my life and my career. It was a big deal for me. And then at this point, so I'm picking up some traction on LinkedIn. I think when I closed 2019, we were doing like $45,000 a month. So you're on track to do $500K in revenue, but then you have employees, expenses, things like that. Like I wasn't making that much money. Going into 2020, I had this idea that I wanted to do these like live curated events, like in-person events. Think about this is pre-COVID, okay? And so I wanted to like fly to Miami and like have Josh Braun come, who was popular on LinkedIn at the time and is a great, sales influencer and person like that, and do an event with him and invite some people and then video it and then be able to use that as content for LinkedIn. And I remember sitting on that decision saying, oh my, like if I fly my team down, if I fly video editors out there, if we rent the space, if I like get Josh Braun in there, all in, this is going to be like $20,000. If this doesn't work, like I'm not going to make any money next month. And I sat on that decision for probably 6 weeks, so scared about making an investment that may not pay off. And then eventually, luckily, I was like, we're going for it. I'm going to do it. We flew the team down. We had the videos in there. I was in Miami. We did the event with Josh Braun. It went really well. Like only 20 people showed up, but I was really doing it for the video content. And then I had an extra day with all the video editors. And I went onto LinkedIn and I looked at the people that I was connected with in Miami. And I found this guy named Gaetano Donardi. Had never talked to the guy before, had never met him in person, nothing. I hit him up and said, yo, dude, I have a video like team in Miami for like an extra day. You want to come to the Airbnb and film like a piece of content together about marketing? And he was like, yeah. And so we did that in Miami in early January of 2020. It was the first time I met him. I had no idea what it was going to turn out to be later, but I'll cover that as well. And the whole thing, like me taking that risk and it working out, paid off big time. Then Josh Braun, who has way more followers than me and way more credibility than me at that point, is now posting content between me and him, and a collaboration that was able to share audiences and build my credibility. And then I started to plan to do many of them. So now I'm like, okay, the Miami one went well. Okay, let's do one next month in LA. And then let's do the month after that in San Francisco. And then let's do the month after that with Jake Dunlap in Austin, Texas. And I had this whole plan around one a month, different events to create content and bring people together. We do the event in LA with Justin Welsh, who was the CRO at Patient Pop at that point, and I was a solopreneur. And I remember at that one, because it was like February 27th, right? So there's like, I wasn't privy to the news around COVID, and I think a lot of people were sort of oblivious to it at that time, even though it came on really fast. And I remember before that event feeling like total shit. Like maybe I did have COVID, I don't know, but I felt like total shit. I showed up to the event, I like could barely think. We did a great event. I basically leaned on Justin and asked him questions, and he did the whole thing. It was a great event. Some of my customers, like Justin Wheeler from Fundraise and a couple of the customers I had at the time showed up, and that was great. And that event really paid off as well. And Justin had a great following and shared the content, and that type of stuff worked out. And I think there's a learning there around when you're coming up, trying to figure out how to collaborate with people and then cross-pollinate audiences and do things like that. And what I did for them to make it easy, I did everything. I invited the people, we promoted it, we got the space. All they had to do was show up and talk for an hour. Then they got all the video content, all the other stuff from them. I made it a very strong proposition to them. And then, a couple weeks later, I was on a vacation. I went on a vacation in 2019 to do some thinking. I met some people down there. We decided, hey, we're going to do that again next year. So I met all the same people where I sort of had this realization that I'm going to be an entrepreneur and go for it. I met them all back down there in St. Martin in March of 2020. On the second to last day of our trip, we got a notification that said, hey, if you don't get out of this country tomorrow, like they're shutting down the country. Like you could feel all the things happening. New York shuts down restaurants. This happened. It was like they canceled the NBA. Like all these things happened day by day. And then all of a sudden they're like, if you don't get out of here, you're in trouble. And so we left the vacation early. At that point, like maybe we were close to a $1 million a year run rate, something like that. And I flew back from that place, and I got back, and like the world is in total chaos. Like you have no idea what's going to happen. There's a ton of uncertainty. Things are shutting down. And I remember being in my apartment wondering, like, are all my customers going to leave tomorrow? Is this it? Like being really, really scared. And I think a lot of people had, like entrepreneurs or even people had jobs. Like a lot of people lost their jobs that were in the restaurant industry or other things like that. A lot of people didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember pretty vividly, like listening to, I don't even remember whose podcast it was, but there was someone that put out a podcast like right around that time that I listened to and said, there's a lot of things that are happening in the world right now, but what you can only control how you react to them. And he basically said, what you should do is you should write down the next 12 months can change my life. The things that I do over the next 12 months can really change my life given in these circumstances. They shut down the country. That event that I was going to do in San Francisco with Sahil Mansouri obviously got canceled. The one for Jake Dunlap in Austin also got canceled. And so that whole strategy was out. Scott Leese and Amy Volas and some people were doing a sales like Zoom gathering because everything was shut down. So they had like, I forget exactly what it was called, but they had like a sales thing. And I hit up Gaetano that next day. And the only time I had ever talked to him was filming that video. And I was like, yo, dude, like people are doing this for sales. I think it might be fun to do it with marketing and get people together and, talk about that stuff. And everybody's shut down. So people will probably do it. Let's do it at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday. And so the second week into COVID, we did that. First episode, I don't even think maybe we called it Demand Gen Live. I'm not even sure we called it Demand Gen Live the first time. Some of the people that are on this show were on either episode 1 or some of the on today. Matt Chanella was on some of the early episodes, Yo-Yo. And we did that and we had no plans for it. Like 17 people showed up. I used AirPods. Like I had a shitty webcam. There was no grand plan around it. And we got off the call and I like felt a bunch of energy of sharing my ideas with people. And I loved collaborating with Gaetano and we reflected on it and we're like, I like doing that. Let's try it again next week. And we tried it again next week. And then after that, we did more than 100 episodes together. And that was the first podcast episode I ever recorded. And at that point, we weren't even making it for a podcast. We were literally just making it for video content for LinkedIn. And then it turned into the State of Demand Gen podcast. And I hired Angelica Taylor, and she did a bunch of great stuff with that as the fourth employee at my company. And it was really slow during that like March, April, May. I remember for our customers in the tech space, there was a lot of uncertainty. People weren't buying stuff. People weren't hiring my company. It was kind of just like it was kind of like just a little bit of instability, a little bit of discomfort. And then once you hit June, there was like a rapid acceleration. Our customers got really great results, at least in certain spaces. And then we were getting a lot of inbound and stuff like that. And then we started to make more. We started to grow revenue. We started to make hires. I hired Judy Sheriff as employee number 7 in July, and then Megan Bowen. And this is a funny. So let me go through this story because this is interesting. And I'll share some things that I've never shared with people today because it'll be funny. But I'm kind of on a roll. I was in New York and I did a film sort of thing like with Gaetano, but with Megan in a WeWork in like down by Times Square in February as well, which I didn't mention. And that was the first time I had met her, but she had been posting some content on LinkedIn and she had some tech job and I had no idea what was going to turn out to that. And then we have about 7 or 8 people at my company and things are starting to break. Like when you start to get to like 6 to 8 people, then you need management layers and you need organization, you need like that type of stuff. And 100%, that ain't me. That is not me. And so things are starting to break. And I'm like, what do I need like a consultant? Like there's this guy, Ryan, like maybe I could promote him to COO, but I knew deep down that he wasn't ready and wasn't going to be able to take on that role. And I was thinking about it for like a week. honestly, I was in Boston. I left my apartment. I like went outside to take my dog for a walk. I smoked some weed. I was like, I hit a joint. I don't think it was legal at that point, but I smoked some weed and I'm walking my dog. And like 5 minutes after that, I literally think I got to hire Megan Bowen out of nowhere. Like I talked to her 3 times and I shot her a message right then. And we talked a little bit, and she eventually had, like, her company was like a food service in office type of company, and that company obviously didn't do well during COVID with that type of stuff. And it ended up working out where she joined in August 2021 or August 2020. And I got to be honest, I think in my entire career that was the best decision that I've ever made. And it came out of nowhere, and it wasn't like a certain plan, but in hindsight, it really was. And what we did for the first 6 months was basically, it was like sort of like a trial run. Like, hey, let's see if we work well together. Let's see if there are different things like that. And then at the beginning of 2021, we inked a deal. She became a partner in the company, and that was that. There was a couple of points in between that I think was a couple of moments, because from that point in like June 2020 to the end of 2021 was like the most incredible high that you would ever feel as an entrepreneur. Some of the most amazing moments in my life. I remember, I don't have the exact date, but I could find it. It was somewhere in fall of 2020, where I think we were closing out a month, and we like closed 2 more customers on the Friday, and we crossed like 2 million ARR. And to me, like, it was the first time that I really felt like this is real. Like it's not like I'm just like in here doing work for $100 an hour. I have really talented people that work for me. I have people that care. We have customers that are getting good results. It was like a lot of people want to work with me. My profile is growing. There was such like an overwhelming feeling of like pride, and not in like an egotistical way, just being like proud of the accomplishments and how far I came during that time. And I remember in my little studio apartment, 450 square foot apartment in Boston, it was nice, but it was tiny. On a Friday night at the end of the quarter, like basically like leaning up against the wall and falling onto the floor, sitting there, breaking down in tears about how happy I was. I don't think I've ever felt more joy professionally than that moment. It was like really moving to me. I'll remember it forever. And it was so cool. And that was a big jumping off point. At that close of that year, I think we ended the year at like 2 million in actual revenue. And then in 2021, we went through this like crazy acceleration. The profile was picking up. The economy was super good. Our customers were super happy. Our team was super inspired. Like things were really, really rolling for us. And in 2020, we went from 2 million to 6 million in 2021. In the last quarter of 2021 was this, I remember we were around, we had our first team offsite in Austin, Texas in September of 2021. That was a great event. We had like 35 people on the team. I remember Jessica Williams and Christian Williams and a couple of other people that were there, and the moments that we shared. And that whole like event was just like so amazing and so great, and you could feel like the energy and all these different things like that. And it was really like a jumping off point. But at the same time, we were facing tons of friction at that point. Like we were at 40 people. Now there's like management layers going on. Megan and I are stretched way too thin trying to like manage all these things. Our like profitability of the company was like so small that like we couldn't hire another executive, or we couldn't make the investments that we wanted to make. It was just like, it just wasn't there. We started to use short-term revenue-based financing, like the companies called Pipe or Cap Chase, or those types of companies that basically take your contracts and then give you the money up front, and then you pay it over like a 6 or a 12-month period of time just to improve cash flow. Because as your company grows and you're scaling that up, what happens is that you have to outlay expenses to hire people and train people and things like that before they're able to take on customers and collect the revenue. So your cash flow, even though your business is profitable, your cash flow drops in the short term. And if you don't have a big bank balance in your bank, then a lot of companies will go out of business at that point. A lot of direct-to-consumer companies go out of business through scale. If they try to go through Walmart, or they try and like buy a bunch of inventory, and they lose, all the money falls down, the sales take too long, and they literally just run out of cash. And so we were like sort of working to mitigate that specific thing. and it worked really well. We eventually outgrew that type of financing structure because it was too short term, and I'll talk through some of the things that we did. And then at the end of 2021, like you're basically feeling invincible. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs that were CEOs, the biggest companies in the world, even people that weren't working at my company, you could feel it in the market. Like there was just so much money being printed and spent, and like we would close $40,000 a month contracts with like one call. You only sort of realize it in hindsight, but in hindsight, when I look back and I see it, like it was too good to be true. It's almost, I think a lot of people that were in that, I wasn't there during that time, but in like the 2006, 2007, like that type of real estate time frame, where like a real estate agent's making like $6 million a year and writing all these mortgages and things like that. You have the same idea of like, when it feels too good to be true, it probably is. And I was at a dinner, and one of my good friends, Chuck Svirk, I've known him since middle school. He's an investor at Mass Mutual, a VC. And he saw it a lot earlier than other people did, including myself, because he's a VC, and was like, hey, like everything's going to slow down. Like, in the exact words that he said was, stuff your coffers, it's about to get ugly. And meanwhile, my company is growing at like 30 to 40% every month. Like we went from 6 million, and the next month we're 8 million ARR, and then the next month we're 12 million ARR, and the next month we're 17 million ARR, and there's just like massive scale happening in my company. And it's really hard to look over at your friend Chuck and be like, yo, dude, like you got something wrong here. Like we doubled revenue in 3 months. Like, what do you mean things are about to get ugly? And this is sort of when some of the story changes. And I think it's important as an entrepreneur or anyone to recognize that in life there are highs and lows, and it's not perfectly cyclical, but there are. And in 2020, at the end of 2021, moving into 2022, and people are looking back at their financial performance and they're thinking about fundraising and things like that, that a lot of companies started to get spooked around that stuff and started to pull money out, started to cut expenses. You started to see layoffs happening. Layoffs actually didn't start happening until the middle of 2022. What companies first were cutting were HR expenses and marketing programs and the agencies and consultancies and things like that. And we were just like directly in the line of fire of that situation. Our retainers were large. We were like literally out of the company's entire P&L. Like my company was the first expense that a logical CFO would cut. And so we had way more churn than planned. We had way less acquisition than planned in Q1. The company was doing fine. It was a bump in the road, but you started to see the leading metrics, but it wasn't really like that clear, like something was going to go wrong. And then we come to April. We have our team offsite. At that point, Refine Labs employed about 110 people. We had our team offsite in San Diego. It wasn't extravagant. We were doing 22 million ARR. We spent $200,000 on a company offsite. It's not a big expense relative to the revenue. It was fine. And it was such an incredible event. And I remember having the exact same feeling in San Diego when everyone was together. It was so powerful and happy. And underneath, I have this feeling in my stomach of this is too good to be true. I remember the exact moment at that event that I felt that. And that event happened. It was amazing. After that, I was supposed to, it was my first big speaking gig. They were going to fly me out to Belgium, and I was going to speak in front of 1,000 people at the Work Smarter conference. And so before that, I was like, hey, I'm going to go to Santorini, Greece for a couple of days, and then I'll bounce over to Belgium and do my talk, and then I'll go to Spain and see my sister for a couple of days, and then I'll go home. And this is middle of June of 2022. And I'm in Santorini for 3 days. I get in there. I'm staying at this absolutely incredible, $1,000 or more a night hotel, resort villa. You got this private pool. It's 10 in the morning or 10 at night in Greece on my last night there. And I'm on a vacation in this beautiful place. And I'm sitting outside and I'm on a Zoom with my CFO, Sarah Santos, and Megan at 10 at night. It's only 3 p.m. for them. And I had the worst feeling that I've ever had as an entrepreneur ever. in the most beautiful place that I've probably ever been, and doing the most like the nicest stuff. And I have the worst feeling that I've ever had as a human, as a professional, not as a human. I have the worst feeling I ever had as a professional, where we're going through the financial model and it hit me for real for the first time that we're going to have to lay off a bunch of people. It was the worst feeling that I've ever had. And gosh, that was like the lowest low that I think that I've felt throughout the whole journey. And that was in the middle of June. I flew to I had this terrible feeling. I felt awful. I had to fly to the conference the next day in Belgium and do a speech in Belgium in front of 1,000 people and pretend that I'm like confident and like successful and all this different stuff, and put on a mask to all these people while I know 2 weeks later I'm going to get home and have to do a big layoff at my company. It really sucked. And then we get back and that type of stuff had to happen, which is really sad. We are a bootstrap company. Like we took on some debt, but that's not really the same as like raising money. And when we did that, that first layoff, we spent, I think, more than $300,000 in severances to be able to make sure that the people that were going were taken care of. We're going to find a new place, and to really be true to the people. When you do that as a public company, or you do that as a venture funded company as a CEO, you're giving away your investors' money. When you do that as a bootstrap company, that $300,000 is coming out of my bank account. It's coming out of Megan's bank account. And that, I think it's just a testament to how, especially for Megan, but also for me, about how much we didn't like making that choice, but we had to help the business survive. And we wanted to make sure we did right by all the people that believed in us. Finishing 2022, my Refine Labs that year lost $1.8 million, which means that my income on paper was like negative $1.5 million. Not a lot of people know that. A lot of people that worked for my company were shitting on me, posting on Glassdoor about how I was such a terrible person, posting about how our company was failing, posting about how bad of a CEO I was, not recognizing that I took a massive financial loss while still providing severances and doing all the things that we could to do the best that we could for all the people in a tough situation. Things continued to get worse in 2022. And in early December of 2022, in November of 2022, we had to make a decision to make another reduction in force, another layoff. We did that in early December. People reflected on that very poorly by doing that right before Christmas and things like that. Our rationale, which in hindsight I'm not sure was right, but the rationale for us was we decided we would prefer to get that over with in December so that we would be able to start January on the right foot and be able to have that behind us. So the team is, starting to rebuild in January versus most companies will do that on January 31st. So they'll let everyone stay through Christmas and have that time, and then they'll lay everyone off in January, and then you have to start rebuilding in the middle of Q1. We made a different decision. That decision ended up being wrong on a multitude of levels. One, people were really mad to get fucking laid off 3 weeks before Christmas, despite us giving an 8-week severance to everybody. And then secondarily, at that time in 2022, at the close of the financial year in 2022, if you look at Salesforce stock, which Salesforce stock is the barometer of tech, all the private markets and everything like that, that the lowest point of Salesforce stock at the entire time was December of 2022 at the close of that year. And so what happened when that happened in Signals? Then the funding environment continues to change. The market becomes more bearish. Companies continue to think about things. And what happened was in January, a bunch of our customers, like even if they were in contracts, like broke contracts, broke legal obligations, like cut our expense out. And had we waited from December until the end of January, we would have known that would have happened, and we would have still had to do a layoff, but it would have been a lot more measured and a lot smarter. And there was like several. This isn't a fun thing for me to talk about. I've never talked about this before, but that's like really what happened. And 2023, we started to make some progress. I feel like the real bottom for this journey at this company was probably like somewhere in the Q1, Q2 of 2023. Some people were there at that time. Maybe they reflect on it the same. I'm not sure. In June of 2023, we started to have some stability in our like overall like revenue and things like that. Basically, like when the market's declining, that eventually you want to hit a bottom and then start moving up again, right? So you want to hit the bottom and then move up. For Salesforce stock, that was December of 2022, and then the stock started to climb in 2023. For private companies and private markets, that's typically 6 to 12 months delayed from the public markets. So for us, it was somewhere between June and December of 2023. For many other companies, it was probably the same. In 2022, for the financial year, despite losing $1.8 million at my company, we collected $19.8 million in revenue. So if you can imagine that my company collected $20 million in revenue in 2022 and lost $1.8 million, that was a tough realization. In 2023, the revenue went from 19.8 million. In 2023, we closed at 12.5, something like that million. So during that time period, the revenue of the business declined by 40%. That is a situation for an entrepreneur that I don't wish on anybody. It was the worst thing. Let me take that back. It was the worst feeling that I had. But in hindsight, was a driver of a lot of positive changes that I made in my life and a lot of positive learnings that I had. To being an entrepreneur and being a professional means going through really hard shit and being able to have the big highs and be able to have the big lows. And I could lie to you and say that during that whole time, like I knew it was going to get better. I never thought about giving up. Megan and I never thought about giving up. But that's not true. Megan and I had 2 specific conversations where we were like, this is fucking terrible. We just did our second layoff. I'm so disappointed in myself. I feel terrible. Every time it feels like we're making a little bit of progress and another customer churns and it feels like we get punched in the mouth and then an employee's leaving. And for the past 2 years, it just feels like we've been in a boxing match just getting our ass kicked with no gloves. And we thought about it twice. And I'm really glad that we didn't do that, but it was a real thing. And I'm sure a lot of people have gone through an experience like that where they're like, I want to quit, and they didn't, and it ended up being a really good decision for them. And it did for me for sure, but that's the truth. And then in the middle of 2023, shout out to Omar. Omar invited me to this. He was like, hey, there's a bunch of people getting together in Miami, agency owners, entrepreneurs, things like that. You should come and check it out. I did that. A guy named Jeremy Haynes runs it. And I went there and I went to the one event and I started working with Jeremy as a coach. And like at that point, I'm at a real low. Like at 2023, we did 12 million. We probably did 500K in profit, right? So the company's not losing money anymore, which is a good thing, but we're not really making much money either. It's basically stable. And then I go back for the next sort of, they do it every quarter. So I went in Q2 and then I go back in Q3, and Jeremy asked me to talk on that one. And he framed up the talk, because a lot of the people in the group are agency owners that are doing 20K a month, 50K a month, like not huge numbers. And I'm over here, like at a revenue standpoint, we're making $1 million a month in revenue and basically zero in profit. So we framed up the talk of like what it's like to get to $1 million a month. Like what was the journey for me? And the sad thing is that the month before I made that talk was the first month in like 2 years that we didn't do $1 million a month. That when I actually made the talk about how to get to $1 million a month, that we did like 980 the month before. I did the talk and I was at some of my lowest lows, and I like wasn't very compelling, and I wasn't confident, and I felt like shit and all this different stuff in front of like 50 people that really wanted to get good information out of me. And I put like, as the CEO, as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to put on a smile and do those types of things, even if you feel like shit. And I'm sure other people have to do that in certain areas of their life. And after I did that talk, Jeremy brought me to the side and he basically said to me, yo, bro, you got to pick a fucking lane. You have to decide, what are you trying to do with this company? Are you trying to cash flow the company? Or are you trying to sell the company? And it's not as binary as that necessarily, but the binary thing that he gave to me in that one drove a lot of the decisions that I made next. Because if you're going to cash flow the company, change your business model, change how you make changes so that when you make $12 million in revenue, you make $3 or $4 million in profit instead of $500K. Make changes. That doesn't mean doing more layoffs. It means changing your business model, changing your revenue model. He's a big proponent of a performance-based model where, like, if your customers get great results, you might get paid $100K a month from them. If your customers don't get good results, you get paid $0. He was a proponent of that model. It doesn't work so well in tech SaaS, but it does in private businesses where he plays. And it basically led me down a thinking track for a couple of months about like what I wanted to do with the company, and also me reflecting on what do I want personally. What am I good at? What do I not like doing? Where are the places where I have weaknesses? And it gave me the realization that I don't want to be a CEO of a big company. I don't want to scale a company. I did it. And there was a lot of things that exposed a bunch of personal weaknesses of mine and things that I'm not skilled at doing. And it was a huge change for me because up until that point, since I started my company to then, I had such a pride and not in a good way, an egotistical way in this way, of being the CEO of a big company. I would write it down every morning for the past 3 years. I wrote down, I'm the CEO of a $100 million company, and have that was my vision. And it was so misguided and so wrong for me to think that way. And it was a big learning for me. At that point, we started to have discussions with Megan, and when I start to realize, hey, these are all the things that I don't like about being a CEO, what it illuminated to me is that's what Megan is. Megan would be a great CEO. And as the primary shareholder of a company, both Megan and I own shares of Refine Labs, but I'm the primary shareholder, that my responsibility is to do what's best for the company, and for the people that work at the company and our customers as a shareholder, not what's best for me as the CEO. And it took a lot of me swallowing my pride and thinking about that and making the adjustment to put my company and myself and my team and our customers in the best position to succeed. And we planned that transition from sometime in Q4 of 2023, and then we announced that in January. But Megan was really running the company in the background for 9 or 12 months before that, and the people that work there know that. Even just in that short period of time, we made that announcement in early January. Now we're at it's been 90 days. The people that work at the company already know things are working better, partially because the market's better, right? It sucks to be and every CEO knows that went through 2022 and 2023, no matter how good of a CEO you are, no matter how good your skills are, no matter how much people like you, when the market sucks, it's really, really hard to be the number one. Because everybody looks at you and everyone puts pressure on you, and everybody doesn't experience the same thing that you do when no matter what decision you make, that you were in a downward spiral where people just aren't buying shit anymore and companies don't have money and they can't get funding. And so partially because the market's getting better, but a lot partially because Megan's a great leader and because it put me in my strengths, which is sharing a bunch of information with you, creating content, working with people in over here, working on business development, working on deals and partnerships and things like that, all the places where I have a lot of strengths. And so it was a big learning for me about putting myself in those positions of where I'm most equipped to succeed and where I provide the most differentiated value rather than what fuels my ego the most. And when I look back, just like when I called my shot on LinkedIn, when I talked about 40 minutes ago in August 7, 2019, where I said, this is going to fundamentally change my life. That decision that we made will go back to put Megan in charge, will in several years play out to be one of the best decisions that I've ever made professionally and personally. The difference in my level of happiness today versus even 6 months ago is out of control. So much greater because I focused on what is true to me and where I actually want to spend my time, and not using the things that I thought I wanted, and being really reflective of that. That was a lot of personal sharing. I can see. I'm glad. I for some parts of that, I was wondering, especially because it got a little dark for a minute. I was wondering, like, when are people going to start dropping off video? Like, I'm like on this monologue where like it feels like the sky is falling and things like that. So I appreciate people persevering through that, and hopefully you learned a couple things. Hopefully you have a more detailed understanding of what it's like to be a CEO and an entrepreneur in the middle of an economic meltdown, or even just a CEO and an entrepreneur in the middle of an economic acceleration, which created some of the greatest highs that I've had professionally ever. And an appreciation for the people that are maybe a director or a manager, that you work at a company, and sometimes that you criticize the leaders that you work for, and you judge them for the decisions that they make. And you say that those people don't get it. If I was in that job, I would do all these things differently. And it's easy to sit in the stands and eat popcorn and boo LeBron James playing the game because he missed a shot. And it's a whole different game when you have to be LeBron James and make that shot. And I did this as an employee. When I was in 2017, I criticized the CEO of the company I worked for every week. A lot of people in the company did. And then future years later, I was in the exact same position being criticized by people. And I finally understood that it's a whole lot different when you have to be that person and take that shot and make it than sitting in the stands talking about how you would have taken the shot. And so I hope that gives some perspective to people that are in those roles, not at Refine Labs. I'm not saying that to people that at my company, but for everybody, that to have a level of understanding and respect isn't the right word, but empathy for the leaders that work at your company and the decisions that they need to make with imperfect data, and the in hindsight will become some wrong decisions that they make, that it's very easy to blame them for something. And in reality, they're smart people. They're doing the best they can. They're making the best decisions that they can. They're doing the things that they think are right for the company and right for you as an employee. And that if you were in the exact same position and you had to make those decisions, that some of the decisions that you make would end up being wrong too. And so if you think that you got it, like I did in 2017 when I was criticizing that CEO, I said if I was in charge, I would be a much better CEO. And fuck, that was not true at all. Like I was a senior manager at this company, and I thought that I could be a better CEO than the CEO of this 300-person company, and boy, was I wrong. But I thought I had the juice. I thought that I had it, and so if you feel like you have the juice, then go for it. If you are saying to yourself, the things that this CEO is choosing or the things that my CMO are doing, like I don't agree with, then go out and start your own company and see what it's like to be a CEO. Go change jobs and go to a Series A company and be the VP of marketing or the marketing leader and experience what that's like. And when you actually get into that position and you actually experience it, you'll find you'll have such greater appreciation for the people that you currently judge and criticize today, because when you're actually in the job, it is a whole different game. It's a whole different thing. It was a massive learning moment for me to actually go through that and realize it. So I hope that there's some takeaways there for some people. And even I see some executives on this, some of the executives at some of the biggest companies in the world on this call and listen to this podcast that know exactly what I just said, that like, when people on your team, if you have a 100-person marketing team and people are criticizing the decisions that you make, it's not like you're oblivious to that. That type of stuff surfaces. When there are people that are talking shit about the CEO knows. When I was talking shit about the CEO in 2017, the CEO knew. And so like people know that. I hope you take some things away from that about having an appreciation for the leaders that you work for and how hard their job is, and how stressful and difficult and hard it can actually be. And I'm going to try and figure out how to end on a high note, because we went through a little bit of a process there, and that's the story. Like, to me, maybe we'll finish on what's next, because I think that's kind of interesting. Like Refine Labs had hit the bottom, and sometime in 2022. Revenue is climbing. We're on track to do $2 million in profit this year. So if you look at the three years, 2022 lose 1.8 million, 2023, 500K, 2024, whatever, 1.5, 2 million in profit. While revenue is actually going down, but the business is becoming so much more efficient, and most tech companies are going through the same thing right now. Maybe their revenue isn't declining so much, but that they have to figure out how to get profit up. And when we think about what's next in this era, is that companies that are profitable end up being sustainable. It means you control your own destiny. It means you can do what's best for your team. It means you can say fuck you to a customer that's a total asshole. That when you're not profitable, you need that customer, which then puts pressure on your team and different stuff like that. And so there's a great sort of financial profile around that company in the future, which I think is very exciting for employees. I think it's very exciting for our customers. There's some new, I'm not going to steal anyone's show, but we have some new technology at Refine Labs that'll be announced in the coming weeks that's super exciting. I don't think we've seen anything like this in like the demand gen and marketing space yet that I'm super excited about, and that those announcements will become forthcoming. They just made a partnership with Aspireship. And so if you all want to learn like the Refine Labs core methodology, all that stuff that used to be paid in the vault is now available for free through the Aspireship website. You can go there, you can sign up, you can create an account, you can consume all that information, like 10 or 12 very deep lessons about marketing and demand gen, all for free. So feel free to take advantage of that if you want. And then what's next for me? Like I'm an executive chairman of Refine Labs. I remain a board member at Refine Labs. We're actually going to do our first board meeting tomorrow, ironically. So I play a different role for the company now, which is, guiding the strategy, validating decisions, being an advisor to the executives that actually run the company in the day-to-day, and being a promoter and an evangelist for the things that company believes in. That's my role. And when you think about the different roles that you can play at that type of level, I'll walk you through them because this was a total realization for me and it fundamentally changed my life. That you can be a shareholder, like you own 7 shares of Apple stock, or you own, 80% of a private company that you started, like you can be a shareholder. You could simultaneously be an executive. You could be the CEO, you could be the COO, you could be the CEO. There's many tech executives that fall into that camp. They have 1% of equity and they're the CMO at this company, right? So you could be partially a shareholder. You're probably not on the board if you own 1% of stock options, then you're the executive. And then you could be an employee, people that end up actually going and doing that work. Maybe there are some stock options and things like that. And the distinction that I want to play to people, specifically entrepreneurs and executives, is that there's many people are a shareholder and an executive at the same time. And for me, many people entrepreneurs that start their company are that, right? You have a majority share of the company that you started and you're the CEO, that you almost feel like that's the only job that I can do. If I own the company, I have to be the CEO. And it was a huge eye-opening thing for me to realize that I could put myself in these different areas of strength, which is like strategy, M&A, finance, content creation, business development, early stage entrepreneurial, where you have to like really be fast and flexible and figure out problems, which is what I'm doing with Paceto right now. That you don't have to be an executive to be a shareholder. You don't have to be an executive to be successful. And that's been a big thing for me. So the places where I choose to play now, I want to be a shareholder. I'm a current shareholder in 4 companies: Refine Labs, Hatch, Paceto, CS2. So I play in the shareholder category. I go to board meetings. I answer Slacks and give them help. I'm not involved in the day-to-day. I don't work with customers. I sometimes promote their news and things like that. And I like supporting companies like that because it really leverages a lot of my strengths. And then I don't want to be an executive. And I love being an entrepreneur. And when I say entrepreneur, I mean early stage entrepreneur. You have 4 employees, you have no money, you're scrappy, you're working on something totally new. Nobody really gets it right now. The market doesn't understand it. You don't have a solution, but you know there's a big problem and you have to go and iterate really fast and listen to customers and figure out the problem, which is what I'm doing with Paceto right now. And that is that's a space where I'm really good. My engineering background works really well. I'm very good at understanding the market and seeing the problems and quantifying the problems and picking those opportunities. So that's a space where I'm playing as well. And to be honest, like that space isn't fun. Like it is like you have no money. Nobody believes in you yet. You have no track record with customers. You're making not a lot of money. You're doing a ton of like what some people would consider bitch work, like a lot of people would be like, oh, I'm too good for that now. But I love doing that type of stuff. And maybe you get out of that stage where people recognize the problem and you build a good product and service, and eventually you're able to pay the fruits of the labor. But many companies don't make it through that stage. And so I'm on that journey with Paceto around signal-based analytics and go-to-market optimization and that type of stuff, which I think is going to be really exciting. I actually think it's the future of B2B go-to-market, like moving from account-based to account-based and signal-based. And we've talked about that quite a bit. The core issue in there and the reason that Paceto is relevant now, and it may have not been relevant 3 years ago, is because the entire financial profile of B2B companies has totally changed. The valuations, how the valuations are calculated, how much money people are going to get, how they deploy money, that before B2B companies could run at a 60-month CAC payback, a 48-month CAC payback, something like that. And now they have to figure out how to get that to 24 months. And you can't just cut a bunch of random stuff and think that you're going to continue to grow at 20% and deliver a 24-month CAC payback. You actually have to be strategic about how you make those choices. And you have to be able to use data to figure out how you get there. And so that's what we're working on at Paceto, which I think, wasn't relevant when companies didn't care about financial profiles across the go-to-market, but now the market's really putting a lot of pressure on there. So I think it's a perfect time. And so those are some things that are next for me. I appreciate all of you being here and listening to going through that. I hope you all learned something from that. But honestly, I did that for me. I wanted to share those things and get those things out because those are a lot of things that I've never told anyone. I wanted people to know what happened and how it worked and how it impacted me as a professional and personally. I want people to understand that story. I hope that nobody has a different view of my company, Refine Labs, because of it. That's totally not my intention. A lot of companies went through hardships. If you look at probably thousands of companies did layoffs during that time period. If it was just my company, then I would say that I did something really wrong as a CEO. But when all the companies are doing that, you have to think that maybe it was something else. Did I do things wrong? For sure. And every entrepreneur and CEO will admit this if they have some level of accountability. You make mistakes every day, and sometimes you make big mistakes. And so I share all of that with you, hopefully that you learned something, but I really wanted to do that for me. It's the 5-year anniversary of when I started my company. That journey has totally changed my life. Financially, for sure. Like there were some ups and downs, but financially totally changed my life from starting the company with $3,000 in my bank account. But the biggest things that you get out of it is the personal growth, the growth of being able to handle stressful situations, the ability to navigate things that you've never done before, but have confidence you're going to be able to get through it, to get put in such a pressure where you're like, oh my God, we have to give up, but you keep going. To have that level of to have the discipline to be able to do all those things, to feel the highs, to feel the lows, to deliver every day. That level of growth, sure, you get it a lot as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, but everyone can get that in their own job and things like that. And that is the biggest thing, because the outcome of that journey for me is the person that I've become. That's really what it is for me. That in 2019, I was not confident. I was insecure. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a lot of style. People were like, whoa, look at the hair, look at this stuff. Like go back and look at the videos. I wasn't well spoken. I didn't have accountability. I blamed other people for my problems, a bunch of different stuff like that. And through the evolution of all of those highs and lows, what's come out of it is like the company and the customers that we've helped and the team and all that stuff is amazing. But for me personally, it's the person that I am today, to be accountable, to be well-spoken, to have such confidence, to have You know, people always comment on my LinkedIn posts. They're like, "Yo, where'd you get that shirt? It's so dope!" Like to be able to have the confidence to do those things, to be able to share that type of stuff with you that a lot of people would bottle up and never share with anybody because they're embarrassed about it or they're ashamed. I know we're getting over time here. I hope people found that valuable. I know that I needed to share that, so I'm happy to do it, and I appreciate you all being here. Thanks so much.